12-year-old Maya had always been the kind of kid who moved like the wind. Not in a showy way, she wasn't trying to impress anyone, but because her body seemed to hum with energy that needed an outlet. She'd sprint to the bus stop even when she had plenty of time, leap over sidewalk cracks like they were lava, and spin in circles just to feel the world blur around her. At school, she was the first to volunteer for relay races, and after class, she'd race her little brother home laughing the whole way. Her legs weren't just limbs. They were her freedom, her joy, her connection to everything alive around her. She lived in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Portland, Oregon, in a modest house with peeling blue paint and a backyard full of dandelions. Her parents worked hard, her mom as a nurse, her dad as a mechanic, but they always made time for weekend hikes, pancake breakfasts, and bedtime stories. Life wasn't fancy, but it was warm, full of inside jokes and mismatched socks and the smell of rain on pine trees. Then, one rainy October evening, everything changed. Maya was in the back seat of her dad's old station wagon, heading home from her best friend's birthday party. She was still buzzing from the sugar and laughter, clutching a goodie bag with a half-melted chocolate bar and a plastic tiara slightly bent from dancing too hard. The rain tapped gently on the roof, and the windshield wipers swished in a steady rhythm. Her dad was humming along to a song on the radio, and her mom turned to smile at her in the rearview mirror. That's the last clear memory she has of feeling whole. A pickup truck, speeding through a red light slick with rain, slammed into the driver's side of their car. The impact was sudden, violent, a sound like thunder and glass shattering all at once. Maya remembers flying forward, then nothing, just blackness. She woke up in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. Tubes snaked from her arms. Her body felt heavy, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Her mom was there, eyes red and swollen, holding her hand so tightly it hurt. Her dad stood by the window, his shoulders slumped, staring out at nothing. The doctor spoke gently, but his words cut like knives. Spinal cord injury. T10 level. Paralysis from the waist down. We'll do everything we can. Maya didn't understand all the medical terms, but she understood the silence that followed. She understood the way her mom's breath hitched when she tried to smile. She understood when she tried to wiggle her toes and felt nothing. Nothing at all. The days that followed were a blur of tests, scans, and therapists with kind eyes and careful hands. They taught her how to shift her weight in bed, how to use a bedpan, how to breathe deeply to keep her lungs strong. They talked about adjusting, adapting, new normals. But all Maya could think about was the feel of grass under her bare feet, the bounce in her step when she ran, the simple act of standing up without help. When she finally saw herself in a mirror, pale, thin, hair tangled, sitting in a wheelchair she hadn't even noticed being wheeled in, she burst into tears. Not the quiet kind, big heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the birthday party she'd never finish, for the soccer season she'd miss, for the future she'd imagined that now felt like a dream slipping through her fingers. Her parents tried to comfort her. "You're still you," her mom whispered, stroking her hair. "You're still our brave girl." But Maya didn't feel brave. She felt broken. Coming home was harder than she expected. The house was the same, but everything felt different. The stairs to her bedroom were now a mountain. The bathroom doorway was too narrow for the wheelchair. Her favorite sneakers sat by the door, useless. Even getting to the kitchen for a glass of water required planning, effort, and often help. School was worse. Some kids didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. Others stared openly, their eyes full of pity or curiosity that made her skin crawl. A few tried too hard, offering to carry her books, speaking in hushed tones, but it only made her feel more like a fragile object than a person. She missed her old friends, but she also didn't want to be around them. How could she explain that she felt like a ghost in her own life? At night, she'd lie in bed and imagine walking. Not just standing, walking. Real walking. The kind where your hips sway, your arms swing, your feet hit the ground with purpose. She'd picture herself running through the park, chasing her brother, feeling the wind in her hair. Sometimes in those dreams, her legs worked perfectly. She'd wake up reaching for them, only to find them still. Silent, unresponsive. Her parents sold their car to pay for physical therapy. They rearranged the living room to make space for her chair. Her dad built a ramp over the front steps with his own hands, his knuckles scraped and bleeding from the work. Her mom stayed up late researching treatments, experimental trials, anything that might help. They never complained, but Maya saw the exhaustion in their eyes, the worry lines deepening on their faces. She started physical therapy 3 times a week at a clinic downtown. It was grueling. The therapist, a gentle woman named Diane, would help her stretch muscles that refused to cooperate, practice balance exercises that left her dizzy, and try to stimulate nerves with electrical pulses that made her jump, but never brought back feeling. Maya pushed herself harder than anyone expected. She'd grit her teeth through the pain, sweat soaking her shirt, refusing to quit even when her arms trembled from holding herself upright on parallel bars. "Why do you push so hard?" Diane asked one day, handing her a water bottle. Maya looked down at her legs, pale and thin beneath the hospital shorts. "Because I have to believe it's possible," she said quietly. "If I stop believing, then it really is over." But belief wasn't enough. Weeks turned into months. Seasons changed. Snow fell, then melted. Spring came with cherry blossoms and birdsong, but Maya watched it all from her window. She saw kids riding bikes, playing tag, jumping in puddles, and each time a quiet ache settled in her chest. She started keeping a journal. Not the kind with fancy covers or glitter pens, just a plain notebook from the drugstore. In it, she wrote everything. Her frustrations, her small victories, like learning to transfer from chair to bed without help. Her fears and her dreams. One entry read, "Today I dreamed I walked into the ocean. The water was cold and my feet sank into the sand. I could feel every grain. I woke up crying, but it was a good cry. It reminded me what I'm fighting for." Her parents found the journal once left open on her desk. They didn't read it. They respected her privacy, but they saw the tear stains on the pages. That night, her mom sat on the edge of her bed and said, "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know." Maya nodded, but inside she knew she did. Not for them, but for herself. If she gave up, who would keep hoping? She began to notice small things she hadn't before. The way sunlight hit the floor in the afternoon. The sound of her brother's laugh when he played video games. The smell of her dad's coffee in the morning. She learned to find joy in moments that didn't require legs. She started drawing. Detailed sketches of birds, trees, clouds, things she could see from her window. She joined an online book club for teens with disabilities and made a few friends who understood what it was like to live in a body that didn't obey. But still, the dream remained. Not just walking. Walking again, like before. Like it was hers to reclaim. She watched videos of people using robotic exoskeletons, clunky, expensive machines that let paralyzed people stand and take slow, mechanical steps. They looked like something from a sci-fi movie, but they were real. She'd stare at the screen, heart pounding, imagining herself inside one of those suits taking her first step. But the cost was astronomical, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and insurance never covered it. Her parents had already drained their savings on therapy and home modifications. There was no way. Still, she kept the dream tucked close. Like a secret flame she protected from the wind. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching fireflies blink in the dusk, her brother rolled up beside her in her spare wheelchair, pretending to be a race car driver. "Vroom, vroom," he shouted, making engine noises. Maya laughed, a real, full laugh that surprised even her. He stopped, looked at her and said, "You're still the fastest person I know." She raised an eyebrow. "How's that?" "Because you never stop trying," he said simply before zooming off again. Maya smiled, watching him go. Maybe he was right. Maybe speed wasn't just about legs. Maybe it was about heart. But deep down, in the quietest part of her soul, she still longed to feel the earth beneath her feet, to walk. Not because she needed to prove anything to anyone, but because it was part of who she was. And who she refused to stop being. She didn't know it yet, but hundreds of miles away, someone was building a machine that might just make that dream possible. Someone who had once been told his own body would never work right, and who had spent every day since proving that wrong. For now, though, Maya's world was this porch, this wheelchair, this ache, and this stubborn, unshakable hope. And sometimes that was enough to keep going. Elias wasn't the kind of billionaire people expected. He didn't live in a glass mansion on a hill, didn't throw parties with celebrities, and never posted pictures of luxury cars on social media. In fact, most people had never even heard his name, unless they followed advances in medical robotics or neurotechnology. To the world, he was just the quiet founder of NeuroVerve, a company that sounded more like a research lab than a busy Ness. But inside that unassuming title was a story few knew, and a mission that burned hotter than any spotlight ever could. He grew up in a small town in Colorado, raised by a single father who worked double shifts at a machine shop just to keep food on the table. Elias was a quiet kid, thoughtful, always tinkering with broken radios or taking apart old computers to see how they worked. But when he was 8, his body started betraying him. His legs would cramp without warning. He'd trip over nothing. Climbing stairs became a battle. Doctors ran test after test until they finally gave a name to the thief stealing his strength: spinal muscular atrophy, a rare genetic disorder that weakens muscles over time. Back then, treatments were limited. Most kids with his condition ended up in wheelchairs by their teens, if not sooner. His father, a man of few words but endless grit, refused to accept that fate. He sold his truck, took out loans, and spent nights hunched over engineering textbooks he barely understood, all to find a way to help his son. One night, after months of searching, he stumbled upon an experimental therapy being tested at a university lab, a combination of gene therapy and neural stimulation that was still years from approval. It was risky. It was expensive. It might not work, but it was a chance. His father scraped together every penny, begged, borrowed, and even took on extra work cleaning office buildings at night. He drove Elias 6 hours each way every weekend for 6 months to receive the treatment. Elias remembered those drives. The hum of the highway, the smell of coffee in a thermos, his dad's tired eyes in the rearview mirror. He remembered the pain of the injections, the frustration of slow progress, and the day, months later, when he stood up from his chair without help for the first time in over a year. He didn't run. He didn't jump. But he stood. And in that moment something shifted, not just in his body, but in his heart. His father cried. Not loudly. Just a few silent tears he quickly wiped away with his sleeve. "You did it," he whispered. But Elias knew the truth. They did it. Together. That experience shaped everything. While other kids dreamed of being astronauts or rock stars, Elias dreamed of building machines that could give others the same second chance he'd been given. He studied engineering in college, then robotics, then neuroscience. He slept in labs, survived on instant noodles, and coded through the night while his classmates partied. By 25, he'd developed a prototype, a lightweight, neural interface that could read faint signals from damaged spinal cords and translate them into movement commands for robotic limbs. He called it Project. Aurora investors didn't get it at first. "Where's the profit?" They'd ask. "Who's going to pay for this?" But Elias wasn't building it for profit. He was building it because he remembered the look in his father's eyes when the doctor said, "There's nothing more we can do." He remembered the kids in the hospital waiting room who never got a chance like he did, so he took a different path. He launched a simple app that used AI to predict traffic patterns. Boring, but wildly useful. Within 2 years, it was used by millions. He sold it for a fortune, and with that money, he founded NeuroVerve, not as a startup chasing exits, but as a mission-driven lab with one goal: to make mobility accessible to anyone who'd lost it, regardless of their bank account. Now 28, Elias lived in a modest apartment above NeuroVerve's research facility in San Diego. The walls were covered in whiteboards filled with equations, sketches of exoskeleton joints, and notes scribbled in his messy handwriting. His office was a corner desk littered with circuit boards, coffee mugs, and a framed photo of him and his dad, taken the summer before his father passed away from a heart attack. Worn out, Elias always believed from years of worry and work. Every morning, he walked through the lab checking in with his team, engineers, neurologists, physical therapists, even ethicists. He insisted on it. "If we're building something that touches human lives," he'd say, "we better understand those lives deeply." One afternoon, he sat in on a team meeting reviewing patient applications for the next phase of Aurora trials. Most candidates came through hospitals or research partnerships, people with recent injuries, strong upper bodies, and access to top-tier rehab centers. But one file stood out. It wasn't the medical data that caught his eye first. It was a short video attached to the application. A girl, maybe 12 or 13, sitting in a wheelchair in a sunlit living room. She wasn't talking about her injury or her pain. She was talking about dandelions. I used to blow on them and make wishes, she said, holding up a fluffy white seed head. Now I can't reach the tall ones. But I still watch them. They float so far even when they start from the ground. She paused, then looked straight into the camera. I don't just want to stand. I want to walk through a field and feel the wind push against my chest. I want to run, even if it's just once. Elias watched the video 3 times. The third time he had to step outside. He knew that look in her eyes. It wasn't desperation. It was determination wrapped in quiet hope, the same look he'd seen in the mirror years ago. He pulled up her file. Her name was Maya. Spinal cord injury at T10, complete paralysis below the waist. No surgical candidates. No response to standard rehab. Family income below average. Insurance denied every advanced therapy request. But her therapist had written a note. She trains harder than anyone I've ever seen. She doesn't ask for miracles, she just refuses to stop trying. Elias sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Aurora was still experimental. The suit was bulky, the neural calibration tricky, and success wasn't guaranteed. But this girl, she reminded him of himself. Not in the injury, but in the spirit. He called a meeting that evening. We're bringing her in, he said. His lead engineer frowned. She's not an ideal candidate. Her injury is old. Neural pathways might be too degraded. Maybe, Elias said. But hope isn't measured in nerve conduction velocity. It's measured in how hard someone's willing to fight. He didn't say it out loud, but he was also thinking of his dad. What if someone had said no to them all those years ago? Where would he be now? Within a week, Elias personally called Maya's family. He didn't lead with his title or his company. He just said, "Hi, my name is Elias. I saw your daughter's video. I think we might be able to help." Her mom was cautious, understandably. They'd been burned before by false promises and expensive dead ends. But Elias didn't push. He answered every question honestly. He explained the risks. It might not work. It would be hard. It would take months. But if it did work even a little, it could change everything. He offered to cover all costs, travel, lodging, therapy, everything. No strings. No media unless they wanted it. Just a chance. A few days later, Maya's mom called back. She said yes, she said, voice thick with emotion. She said, "Tell him I'll work harder than anyone he's ever met." Elias smiled. I believe her. He arranged for a private flight, not because he liked luxury, but because commercial travel would be too taxing for someone in her condition. He had a guest apartment prepared near the lab, fully accessible, with a garden she could wheel into. He even had his team build a custom ramp before she arrived, just to make sure there were no barriers from the moment she stepped off the plane. The night before she was due to arrive, Elias stayed late in the lab. He stood in front of the latest Aurora prototype, a sleek silver exoskeleton that looked more like armor from a futuristic story than medical equipment. It was lighter than previous versions, powered by AI that learned the user's movement patterns over time. But it was still just metal and wires without someone to bring it to life. He thought about the first time he stood after his treatment, the wobble in his knees, the way his dad's hand hovered nearby, ready to catch him but not touching, giving him space to do it himself. That moment wasn't just about walking. It was about dignity, about being seen as capable, not broken. He wanted that for Maya, not just steps, not just headlines, but the quiet, powerful truth that her body, however it worked, was still hers to command. The next morning, he waited at the small private terminal, not in a suit, but in jeans and a worn Neuroverve hoodie. When the plane taxied in, he saw her through the window, smaller than he expected, eyes wide as she took in the California sun. Her mom helped her into her chair, and as they rolled toward the exit, Maya looked around not with fear, but curiosity. Elias walked up slowly, not towering over her, but crouching slightly so they were at eye level. "Hey," he said gently. "Welcome to San Diego." She studied him for a long moment, then asked, "Is it real?" "The suit?" He nodded. "It is. But it's not magic. It's just a tool. The real work, that's all you." She didn't smile, but something in her posture softened. "I'm ready to work." And just like that, the next chapter began, not with fanfare, but with 2 people who understood what it meant to lose something precious, and what it took to fight for it again. Over the next few days, Elias made sure Maya and her mom settled in. He showed them around the facility, not the polished tour version, but the real one, The humming servers, the 3D printers churning out joint components, the therapy room with mats and parallel bars and mirrors. He introduced her to Diane, the lead physical therapist who had worked with Elias since the early days. "You'll push her hard," Elias told Diane quietly, "but never make her feel like she's failing." "I know the difference," Diane replied, glancing at Emma, who was already testing the wheelchair's turning radius in the hallway. That first week was all about assessment. Scans of Maya's spine, tests of her remaining muscle activity, brainwave mapping to see if her motor cortex still sent signals, even if they couldn't reach her legs. Some days were frustrating. The machines beeped, the sensors slipped, and Maya grew quiet, retreating into herself. But Elias noticed something others might miss. Even on the hardest days, she'd ask questions. "Why does this electrode go here? How does the AI learn my movement? What happens if I imagine running instead of walking?" She wasn't just a patient. She was a participant, a partner. One evening, after a long session, Elias found her sitting alone in the garden, staring at the sunset. He sat beside her on the bench, not too close. "Tough day?" he asked. She nodded. "My brain's sending signals, but they're weak, like whispers. The machine can't hear them." "Maybe it's not the machine," he said. "Maybe it's learning your voice. And voices take time to recognize." She looked at him then, really looked. "Did it work for you? The treatment?" "It gave me a chance," he said. "But I had to grab it." Every single day, they sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn pink and gold. Crickets started chirping. Somewhere a fountain trickled. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think only walking would fix me. But being here, talking to you, I think maybe I was wrong." Elias smiled. "Walking might be the goal. But the journey? That's where you find out who you really are." She didn't answer, but the tension in her shoulders eased. The next morning, she walked into the lab with a new fire in her eyes. Not the desperate kind, but the steady, focused kind, the kind that says, "I'm not done yet." And Elias knew deep in his bones that this wasn't just another trial. This was the reason he'd built Aurora in the first place. The first time Maya saw the Aurora suit up close, she didn't say a word. She just stared at it, standing silently in the center of the lab like some kind of futuristic statue. Sleek silver joints, carbon fiber limbs, soft padding where it would touch her skin, and thin wires snaking into a small control pack at the back. It looked powerful but not cold, almost alive in a quiet way. "It's smaller than I thought," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's built for you," Elias replied, standing a few feet away, giving her space. "Not for a lab, not for a demo. For you." She reached out and touched the knee joint. It was cool, smooth, and surprisingly light. "Will it feel like me?" "That's the goal," he said. "Not to move for you, but to move with you." The fitting began the next day. It took hours. Technicians adjusted straps, calibrated sensors, and placed tiny electrode pads along her spine and thighs, places where even the faintest flicker of nerve activity might still exist. The suit wrapped around her legs and hips like a second skeleton, held in place by a supportive harness that connected to her torso. A lightweight headset, no bigger than a pair of headphones, sat just above her ears, reading signals from her motor cortex, the part of the brain that plans movement. "Think about lifting your right foot, Diane," the therapist instructed gently. Maya closed her eyes. She pictured it clearly, heel rising, toes pushing off, legs swinging forward. She could feel the motion in her mind, sharp and real, but nothing happened. The suit stayed still. She opened her eyes, jaw tight. "I did it. I really did." "You did," Diane said calmly, "but your body didn't get the message." "That's okay. The suit just needs to learn your language." And so began the real work. Every morning, Maya arrived at the lab before sunrise. She'd stretch, hydrate, and mentally prepare herself like an athlete before a race. Then, strapped into Aurora, she'd stand between parallel bars, hands gripping tightly while the system warmed up. At first, the suit responded only to exaggerated thoughts, like shouting in her mind instead of speaking. She'd have to yell, "Step!" internally just to get a twitch. Some days, the system misfired. Her leg would jerk sideways or the knee would lock too soon, throwing her off balance. Diane was always there, ready to catch her, but never stepping in unless absolutely necessary. "Your brain and the suit need to figure this out together," she'd say. "I'm just the safety net. Elias didn't hover. He watched from a monitor in the next room, tracking neural signal strength, gait symmetry, muscle activation patterns. But every afternoon, without fail, he'd come in, sit on the floor beside her chair, and ask one simple question. What did you learn today? At first, Maya gave short answers. Nothing. It didn't work. I'm tired. But over time, her answers changed. Today, I realized I tense my shoulders when I'm frustrated. That messes up the signal. Or, if I imagine walking on sand, the movement feels smoother. Or, I think my left side is stronger than my right, even if I can't feel it. Elias listened like every word mattered because to him it did. One rainy Tuesday, after 3 weeks of little progress, Maya broke down. She'd been trying to take a single step for over an hour. Sweat soaked her shirt. Her arms shook from holding herself up. The suit buzzed and clicked, but her foot wouldn't move. I can't do this, she whispered, tears mixing with sweat on her cheeks. It's not working. Maybe my body really is done. Elias didn't offer empty comfort. He just sat beside her, silent for a long moment. Then he said, You know, when I was a kid, I used to practice standing in front of the mirror for 20 minutes a day. Just standing. No walking. No running, just not falling. Some days I lasted 10 seconds. Other days I collapsed before I even got up. But my dad never said, maybe you should quit. He just said, try again tomorrow. He looked at her. You're not failing, Maya. You're teaching a machine how to listen to a whisper. That takes time and courage. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. It just hurts. To hope so hard. I know, he said softly. But hope isn't the problem. Giving up is. She took a deep breath. Okay, one more try. That day she didn't take a step. But she stood for 45 seconds, longer than ever before, without the suit's full support. Just her core, her arms, and her will holding her upright. Small victories, but they mattered. Weeks passed. The team tweaked the AI algorithm daily, feeding it data from Maya's sessions. The suit began to anticipate her intentions instead of just reacting. If she thought about shifting her weight, it would subtly adjust balance before she even moved. If she imagined a longer stride, it would gently extend the step. And then, one morning, something changed. Maya stood in the bars, eyes closed, breathing slowly. She wasn't forcing it. She wasn't shouting in her mind. She just remembered. She remembered the feeling of walking home from school, backpack bouncing, sun on her face. She remembered the rhythm, the ease, the joy of it. And then, her right foot lifted, not a jerk. Not a spasm. A smooth, deliberate lift, just like she'd imagined. Her eyes flew open. Did you see that? She gasped. Diane was already smiling. I saw it. Again, Maya said, voice trembling. She focused. Left foot this time. And it moved. Slow, careful, but real. Step. Step. She took 2 full steps between the bars, supported only by her hands and the whisper-thin guidance of the Aurora suit. She burst into tears, not from frustration, but from disbelief. I did it, she sobbed. I really walked. Elias, watching from the doorway, felt his own eyes sting. He didn't clap. He didn't cheer. He just nodded, a quiet pride glowing in his chest. From that day on, everything shifted. Maya's confidence grew. She started practicing without the bars, using only a walker. Then just a single hand on Diane's shoulder. The suit responded faster, smoother, as if it were finally speaking her language fluently. She began to experiment, trying to walk faster, turn corners, even stop and start on command. One afternoon, Elias brought in a small patch of artificial grass, the kind used in playgrounds. He laid it in the middle of the therapy room. What's this for? Maya asked. For your first real step outside your mind, he said. She looked at him confused. Remember what you said in your video? About wanting to feel grass under your feet? Her breath caught. She wheeled over, then stood with the suit's help. Slowly, carefully, she stepped onto the green fibers, and then she smiled. A real wide, sun-breaking-through-clouds smile. It's soft, she whispered. It's just the beginning, Elias said. As the weeks turned into months, Maya's progress amazed even the most skeptical engineers. She wasn't just using the suit, she was partnering with it. Her brain was rewiring itself, finding new pathways, strengthening old ones. Scans showed increased activity in her motor cortex, and even faint signals returning in her lower spine. something the doctors had said was nearly impossible after so long. But it wasn't all smooth. There were days when the system glitched, days when her muscles cramped from overuse, days when she felt like an imposter, like the suit was doing all the work, and she was just along for the ride. On one of those hard days, Elias found her sitting alone in the garden again, staring at her legs. "I don't know if this counts," she said without looking up. "If a machine moves me, am I really walking? Or am I just pretending?" He sat beside her. "Do you remember how you walked before the accident?" "Of course I do." "Did you think about every muscle? Every nerve signal? Every joint angle?" She shook her head. "No, it just happened." "Exactly," he said. "Walking isn't about how the movement happens. It's about who is choosing to move. You're the one deciding to step forward. The suit is just the bridge between your why and your body. That's not pretending. That's healing." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I miss running." "I know," he said. "But maybe walking is enough for now." She nodded. "Yeah, maybe it is." The team began preparing for the next phase, walking outside the lab. Not on mats or artificial grass, but on real ground. Sidewalks, gravel, grass, even a gentle slope in the nearby park. Maya was nervous. What if I fall? What if people stare? Then they stare. Elias said simply, "You're not doing this for them. You're doing it for you." The first outdoor walk was scheduled for a quiet Saturday morning. Only Diane, Elias, and Maya's mom came along. They chose a small neighborhood park with smooth paths and tall trees. Maya stood at the edge of the sidewalk, heart pounding. The suit hummed softly, ready. She took a breath, focused, and stepped forward. The pavement felt different, rougher, realer. Sunlight dappled through the leaves. A dog barked in the distance. A breeze tugged at her hair. She walked 10 feet, then 20. Then she stopped, turned, and walked back. No one said a word. But her mom was crying. Diane was beaming. And Elias, he just watched, hands in his pockets, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. Later that day, Maya asked Elias a question that surprised him. "Why me?" she said. "There are so many people who need this. People with newer injuries, better chances. Why did you pick me?" He didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the sunset, the same view they'd shared weeks ago. "Because you didn't just want to walk," he said finally. "You wanted to live. And that's what this is really about. Not legs, not machines, not even walking. It's about getting your life back. Your joy. Your freedom." She thought about that. Then she said, "I think I'm starting to get it back." "You are," he said. "One step at a time." As summer approached, Maya's visits to the lab became less about training and more about refining. She could now walk for 10 minutes without stopping. She could turn, stop, even pick up a light object while standing. The suit had become an extension of her, not a crutch, but a companion. Elias began talking about the future, not just for her, but for others. "We're going to make this available to more people," he told her one afternoon. "Not just the lucky few, everyone who needs it." "But it's so expensive," she said. "It doesn't have to be," he replied. "We're redesigning the next version to be simpler, cheaper, easier to maintain. Your data is helping us do that. You're not just a patient, Maya. You're helping build a new world." She hadn't thought of it that way before, but the idea filled her with a strange kind of pride. One evening, as they sat on the lab's rooftop watching the city lights come on, Maya turned to Elias. "Thank you," she said. He shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. I just built the door." "You walked through it," she smiled. "Then I guess I'll keep walking." And she did, not because the path was easy, not because the suit made her whole, but because deep down, she'd never stopped believing that she was worthy of taking up space in the world, on her own 2 feet, however they moved, and that more than anything, was the real miracle. The morning it happened, the sky was the color of wet cement, gray, soft, and quiet. Rain tapped gently against the lab's windows, a steady rhythm that matched the hum of the Aurora suit's power core as it warmed up. Maya stood in the center of the therapy room, not between bars or holding a walker, just standing on her own with the suit wrapped around her like a second skin. Her hands rested lightly at her sides. Her breath was calm. Her eyes were focused. She'd been walking for months now, Inside the lab, around the block, even through the grocery store with her mom holding the cart for balance. But today felt different, not because of the weather or the schedule, but because something inside her had shifted. The fear was still there, sure. The worry that her body would betray her, that the machine would fail, that this whole thing was too good to be true. But it no longer ruled her. It sat quietly in the background like an old radio playing static in another room. Diane stood a few feet away, arms crossed, but her posture was relaxed. She wasn't hovering. She didn't need to. "You ready?" she asked, voice low. Maya nodded. "I think so." Elias watched from the doorway, arms folded, expression unreadable. He'd been quieter than usual all week. Not distant, just thoughtful, like he was holding his breath without realizing it. Maya closed her eyes. She didn't picture walking. She didn't force it. Instead, she remembered something her little brother had said months ago back home. "You're still the fastest person I know." At the time, it had made her smile through tears. Now it gave her courage. She thought about grass. Real grass. Not the fake kind in the lab, but the kind that grew wild behind her house, damp with morning dew, cool under bare feet. She remembered how it bent when she ran through it, how it smelled after rain, how it tickled her ankles. And then, without thinking, she stepped forward, her right foot lifted smoothly, placed down with quiet certainty, then her left, then right again. She walked, not in a straight line between bars, not with a hand on someone's shoulder, not for a few seconds before fatigue set in. She walked across the entire room, 10 full steps, her posture tall, her arms swinging naturally, her head held high. The suit responded like it was reading her soul, not just her brainwaves. Every movement was hers, guided but not controlled, supported but not carried. When she reached the far wall, she turned around and walked back. Halfway through, her eyes met Elias's. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his throat tightened, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw tears in his eyes. Diane clapped once, softly, respectfully, but Maya didn't stop. She kept walking, back and forth like she was relearning the shape of the world through her feet. Each step was a promise kept, to herself, to her family, to the girl who used to blow dandelion wishes into the wind. When she finally stopped, her chest was rising and falling fast, not from exhaustion, but from awe. "I did it," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "You did," Diane said, voice thick. "All by yourself." Maya looked down at her legs, still thin, still pale, still unable to move without the suit, but for the first time, she didn't see them as broken. She saw them as part of a story that wasn't over. Later that day, Elias asked if she wanted to try something new. "Like what?" she asked, sipping water in the recovery lounge. "There's a trail behind the research campus," he said, flat, smooth, about 50 yards long. Trees on both sides, quiet. She knew what he was really asking. "Do you trust yourself enough to walk where no one can catch you?" She thought about it. Then she nodded. "Yeah, let's go." They went at dusk when the rain had stopped and the air smelled like wet earth and eucalyptus. The trail was narrow, lined with ferns and wildflowers. A few birds called from the trees. No one else was around. Maya stood at the start, the suit humming softly. She took a breath and stepped onto the path. The ground was uneven, slightly softer than pavement with tiny roots and pebbles underfoot. The suit adjusted instantly, shifting balance, tightening joints where needed. But the decision to move? That was all hers. She walked slowly at first, testing each step. Then, as confidence grew, she picked up speed. Not running, she wasn't ready for that, but walking with purpose, with joy. Halfway down the trail, she stopped, bent slightly, and touched a patch of moss growing on a rock. It was cool and velvety. She laughed, a bright surprise sound that startled a nearby sparrow into flight. Elias stood back, watching, hands in his pockets. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. When she returned, her face was glowing. "It felt real," she said. "Like I was really there, not just moving through space." "That's because you were," he said. "You weren't just operating a machine. You were living in your body again." Over the next few weeks, Maya pushed further. She walked on gravel, on slight inclines, even on a sandy beach during a weekend trip Elias arranged. Each surface taught her something new, how her weight shifted, how her balance adjusted. how the suit and her mind worked together like old friends. But the real test came when she decided to go back home. Not for a visit, but to walk there. Her high school graduation was coming up in 2 months. She'd been accepted, of course. She'd kept up with schoolwork through online classes. But she'd assumed she'd receive her diploma in her wheelchair, like she did everything else. Then one night, she called Elias. "What if I walk across the stage?" she asked. He was silent for a moment. "It's possible, but it'll be hard. The auditorium floor is slick. The lights are bright. There'll be hundreds of people watching." "I know," she said, "but I want to do it. Not for them. For me." He didn't hesitate. "Then we'll make it happen." The training intensified. They simulated the stage, same height, same flooring, same distance. Maya practiced in her cap and gown, borrowed from the drama department, learning how the fabric affected her balance, how the tassels swinging in her face might distract her. She rehearsed bowing, accepting the diploma, turning and walking back, all while managing nerves, bright lights, and the weight of expectation. There were stumbles. One afternoon she tripped on the hem of the gown and fell hard onto the mats. For a moment she just lay there, breathing fast, humiliation burning in her cheeks. Elias knelt beside her. "Want to quit?" She looked up at him, eyes blazing. "No, then get up," she did. And she tried again. The night before graduation, she couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her shoes. The special O. Nez Elias had modified to fit the suit's footplates, polished to a shine. Her mom came in, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Nervous?" "Terrified," Maya admitted. Her mom sat beside her. "You know, when you were little, you fell off your bike and skinned both knees. You cried for 5 minutes, then got back on and rode all the way to the park. You've always been like that, scared but never stopped." Maya smiled faintly. "I just don't want to let anyone down." "You could never," her mom said. "Not us, not yourself. Just walk like you do when no one's watching, like it's just you and the ground." Graduation day arrived sunny and warm. The auditorium buzzed with families, cameras, balloons. Maya waited backstage in her gown, the Aurora suit hidden beneath the fabric, its control pack disguised as a small backpack. Her heart pounded like a drum. Elias stood nearby, not as a billionaire or an inventor, but as a friend. "Remember," he said quietly, "you've already done the hard part. Today is just you showing the world what you've already won." When her name was called, she stepped into the light. Hundreds of faces turned toward her. Cameras flashed. Someone gasped, but Maya didn't look at them. She looked straight ahead, at the stage, at the diploma, at the path she'd chosen, and she walked, not perfectly, not magically, but steadily, confidently, 1 foot in front of the other, just like she'd practiced in the rain, on the trail, in the quiet of the lab. When she reached the principal, she took the diploma with a small, proud smile. She turned, walked back, sat down. The applause started slowly, then grew into a roar, not out of pity but out of awe. Backstage, Elias didn't cheer. He just closed his eyes for a second and whispered, "Yes." After the ceremony, Maya wheeled herself to the parking lot, the suit powered down, hidden once more. Her brother ran up and hugged her so hard she nearly tipped over. "You walked," he yelled. "You really walked!" She laughed, tears in her eyes. "I did." Her parents stood nearby, holding hands, faces streaked with happy tears. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. That night, back at the guest apartment, Maya sat on the balcony, diploma in her lap, watching the stars come out. Elias joined her, holding 2 cans of soda. "How do you feel?" "Like I got a piece of myself back," she said. "But also, like this is just the beginning," he nodded. "It is." She looked at him. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, "we make sure other kids get to walk across their stages too." He told her about his new plan, to turn Neuroverve's medical division into a non-profit, to license the Aurora design to hospitals worldwide, to train therapists, simplify the tech, and slash the cost so insurance and even families with little money could afford it. "But it'll take time," he admitted. "And money. I'll help," she said immediately. "I'll talk to people. Show them it's possible." He smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Over the next few weeks, Maya didn't rush back home. She stayed to help refine the next version of the suit, testing new materials, giving feedback on comfort, even helping write user guides in language real people could understand. She met other trial participants, a veteran who wanted to stand at his daughter's wedding, a teenager who dreamed of dancing at prom, a grandmother who just wanted to walk her dog again. She listened to their stories, shared hers, and realized her journey wasn't unique. It was just the first chapter in a much bigger story. One afternoon, as she packed her bags to return home, Elias handed her a small box. "What's this?" she asked. "A gift," he said, "for the road." Inside was a custom-made pendant, a tiny silver dandelion seed suspended in clear resin. "So you never forget," he said, "that even things that start from the ground can fly." She fastened it around her neck. It felt light but full of meaning. The day she left, the whole team came to say goodbye. Diane hugged her tightly. "You changed everything," she whispered. Maya shook her head. "No, you all gave me the chance. I just took it." As the car pulled away from the lab, she looked out the window at the California sun, the palm trees, the place where she'd learned to walk again. She wasn't the same girl who'd arrived months ago, scared, skeptical, carrying a quiet ache. She was stronger, not just in her legs, but in her heart, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that her walking wasn't the end of the story. It was the first real step into the rest of her life. Life didn't magically fix itself after Maya walked across that graduation stage. The world didn't stop turning. Her legs still didn't move on their own. She still needed the Aurora suit to stand, to walk, to feel the ground beneath her feet. But something deeper had shifted, something no machine could measure. She carried herself differently now. Not with the weight of what she'd lost, but with the quiet pride of what she'd reclaimed. Back home, things felt both familiar and new. Her old bedroom still had the same posters on the walls, the same squeaky floorboard by the door, the same view of the backyard dandelions. But now, when she looked out the window, she didn't just see what she couldn't reach, she saw possibilities. She started taking short walks around the block every morning, the suit humming softly under her jeans, neighbors waving like nothing had changed. And in a way it hadn't. She was still the same girl, just with a new way of moving through the world. Her little brother, once shy about her wheelchair, now bragged to his friends, "My sister walks with a robot suit. It's like Iron Man, but for real." She'd roll her eyes, but secretly she loved it. He made her feel normal again, not in spite of the suit, but because of how she used it. School was different too. She enrolled in community college part-time, studying biology with a quiet dream of one day working in medical tech, not to build machines necessarily, but to understand how bodies heal, how hope can be wired into science. Professors treated her like any other student. Classmates asked questions not out of pity but curiosity, and she answered them honestly without shame. But the biggest change came when Elias called one evening, voice quiet but urgent. "We're launching the Aurora Access program next month," he said. "We've cut production costs by 60%. Hospitals in 10 states are signing up, but we need voices, real ones, to tell the story. People who've lived it." Maya didn't hesitate. "I'm in." Her first public talk was at a medical conference in Chicago. She stood on stage, not in a gown, not in a demo suit, but in simple clothes, the Aurora hidden beneath, its presence known only by the way she moved. She didn't recite statistics or technical specs. She told her story. The crash, the silence in her legs, the long nights of doubt, the first step in the rain, the walk across the stage. She spoke about how walking wasn't just about movement, but about dignity, about being seen. When she finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in applause. Afterward, people lined up to talk to her, parents with tears in their eyes, doctors taking notes, teenagers in wheelchairs looking at her like she held a map to a future they'd been told didn't exist. One girl, maybe 10 years old, tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered loud enough for Maya to hear, "If she can do it, maybe I can too." That moment stayed with her longer than any standing ovation. From then on, Maya became a bridge, not just between technology and the human body, but between despair and possibility. She visited hospitals, spoke at schools, testified before lawmakers about the need for insurance to cover neuroprosthetics. She never asked for praise. She just showed up, spoke truth, and let her steps do the rest. Elias watched it all with quiet pride. He'd built the machine, yes, but she gave it soul. And that, he realized, was the missing piece all along. Technology could open doors, but only people could walk through them with courage. Meanwhile, NeuroVerve's nonprofit arm grew faster than anyone expected. With Maya's input, they simplified the user interface, added voice commands for those with limited hand mobility, and created a mobile app that let users track progress and connect with others in the program. Families who once thought this kind of help was a fantasy now received Aurora units shipped to their doorsteps, with remote training and 24/7 support. One afternoon, Maya video called Elias from her living room. Behind her, sunlight streamed through the window, catching the silver dandelion pendant at her throat. "You remember that veteran you told me about?" she asked. "The one who wanted to stand at his daughter's wedding?" Elias nodded. "Yeah, James. He walked her down the aisle last weekend," she said, eyes shining. "His wife sent me a photo. He's crying. She's in white. And he's standing, tall, proud, holding her hand." Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We did that." "No," Maya corrected gently. "You built the chance. He took it." "Just like I did," he smiled. "Fair enough." As the years passed, Maya's role evolved. She didn't just speak about the technology, she helped shape it. She joined NeuroVerve's advisory board, not as a figurehead but as a real voice in design meetings. "This strap rubs," she'd say. "That button's too small for arthritic hands. What if we made the startup sound less robotic and more like a heartbeat?" Her feedback made the suits more human, more intuitive, more kind. She also started a mentorship program for newly injured teens, weekly video calls where they could vent, ask questions, or just sit in shared silence. She never promised miracles. "Some days will suck," she'd say, "but you're not alone, and your worth isn't tied to your legs." One of her mentees, a boy who'd broken his spine in a diving accident, later walked his first steps using Aurora. When he called to tell her, he sobbed into the phone. "You made me believe it was possible," he said. "No," she replied. "You made yourself believe. I just reminded you how." Back in San Diego, Elias kept working, but his focus had shifted. He no longer chased breakthroughs for the sake of innovation. He chased them for the faces behind the data. The grandmother walking her dog, the student taking the bus to class, the father playing catch in the yard. He'd visit clinics unannounced, not to inspect, but to listen. And every time he saw someone take their first step in an Aurora suit, he thought of a rainy morning in a Portland hospital, and a boy who once couldn't stand without help. Years later, at a global health summit in Geneva, Maya and Elias stood side by side as the World Health Organization announced Aurora as a recommended mobility solution for spinal cord injuries worldwide. The room was full of diplomats, scientists, and journalists. Cameras flashed. Speeches were made. But afterward, as they stepped out onto a quiet balcony overlooking Lake Geneva, neither mentioned the announcement. Instead, Maya leaned on the railing, watching swans glide across the water. "Remember when I thought walking again was the end goal?" she said softly. Elias joined her. "Yeah. It wasn't," she said. "It was just the beginning of learning how to live fully, exactly as I am." He nodded. "That's the real miracle. Not the suit. The courage to keep going." She turned to him then, eyes clear and steady. "You didn't just give me legs, you know." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You gave me back my voice. And that's worth more." He didn't argue. He just smiled. The kind of smile that comes from seeing a dream not just realized, but multiplied. Back home, Maya kept walking, not just on smooth floors or prepared trails, but through life. Messy, unpredictable, beautiful life. She hiked gentle slopes with her brother. She danced at her best friend's wedding, slowly, carefully, but with joy. She stood in the ocean, feeling real waves lap at her ankles. The suit sealed against the salt water, her heart full. And every spring, when the dandelions bloomed in her backyard, she'd pick one, close her eyes, and blow. Not to make a wish, but to celebrate the one that had already come true. Elias, for his part, never sought fame. He still lived in the same apartment above the lab, still wore the same worn hoodie, still drank too much coffee. But now his whiteboards were covered not just with schematics, but with notes from users. "Thank you for giving me back my mornings. My son saw me stand for the first time yesterday. I walked my daughter to school today." He kept everyone, because in the end, that's what it was always about, not billions, not breakthroughs, not even walking. It was about people, about a girl who refused to stop dreaming, and a young man who remembered what it felt like to be given a second chance and decided to spend his life paying it forward. Together, they hadn't just changed one life, they'd lit a path for thousands, and the best part? The walking never stopped.